Good morning, everybody. It is good to be here, and the weather is just awesome for now, anyway. Hopefully, we don't get another heat wave before it's over with. The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the blueprint of God, and we went over the foundation, and last week we went over the framing. Two important things: our foundation being Jesus Christ, and the framing of that onto that foundation, and how we can have some great framing, but if we build it on a poor foundation, it's just going to fall in. I want to continue talking about that and talking about God's building process and God's blueprint for our lives. And what I want to talk about now is, in God's building process, is the cost of that building, and what that entails. Anyone that has ever built a house, or even anything, shoot, if you even try to go to Home Depot and get the materials to go build a dog house, that's going to set you back $600-700. But anyone who's ever built a house knows that everything is done revolves around one key factor, and that is the budget. The building process is expensive, to say the least. You'll spend thousands of dollars before you even break ground. Selecting and purchasing the land is a time-consuming and expensive process. Paying lawyers, buying permits, buying land, clearing the land, choosing the blueprints, lining up the contractors, buying the material. The building process is very expensive. And let's turn to Luke 14:26. But yes, it is. I know how much people pay just for cabinets. And when we go to these new built houses, nowadays it's upward. I mean, just a house that would have been, $300,000-400,000 10 years ago is upwards of $1 million now. And I remember growing up, being in high school in the 90s, and you'd tell somebody, say, "Oh, that's $1 million house." Well, I mean, that's a mansion. Now $1 million house is much of nothing nowadays. I mean, honestly, what did I say? Luke. But Luke 14. The cost of that building, and I'm sure you kind of figure where I'm going with this, but Luke 14:26 says, "If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build the tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it?" That's our key verse right there. "Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying that this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000? Or else while the other is yet a great way off, he sendeth ambassadors and desireth conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you that forsaketh not all that he hath, he cannot be my disciple." And what it's talking about here is, before you build, you consider the cost. You consider what it's going to take. Because if you go to start to build something and you figure out, I don't have enough money, you ain't going to be able to finish it. And in this passage of Scripture, Jesus likens the life of discipleship to a man that begins a building project without counting the cost. And there's a couple interesting concepts that Jesus brings out about this man. First, we notice the man's intentions in verse 28. "For which of you intending to build the tower?" And I think that all of us here coming to this church, we come here with the best of intentions to build upon our relationship with Christ, to build upon the relationship we have with the church and with each other. And I don't see anybody that walks through that door doesn't have the best of intentions at heart. And that's all well and good, but if we don't sit back and consider what being a true disciple of Christ costs, That's why we see a lot of people leave the church, because they get in over their head and they say, well, that costs too much. I can't do that. I'm not going to, They get to a point where they don't want to give up a lot of their sin, for one. I've seen that many times. We preach a lot about sin in this church, and it scares people off. I mean, it runs people off. And that cost is too much for them. They've got things that they just can't let go of. So there's that. But back to verse 28, we notice his intentions. For which of you intending to build a tower? I got a couple of quotes here. First one is, remember, people will judge you by your actions, not your intentions. You may have a heart of gold, but so does a hard-boiled egg. Like I said, people have the best of intentions coming here, but when we look at somebody who's been coming here a while and there's no fruit to show for it, and they're still acting like the same person they were when they started coming here, say a year ago or whatever, that their actions prove their worth. The other quote I got is, hypocrisy is judging others by their behavior while judging ourselves by our intentions. And that's a good one. We always all have the best of intentions, and when we start judging people by their behavior while judging ourselves by what we want to do and not by what we are actually doing, that's bad right there. Moving on. Somewhere, somehow, this man in verse 28, he had inspired to build a tower. Somebody had motivated him to build the tower. He had no doubt seen a tower and been impressed with its height, its strength, and its power. He had desired that. He wanted that for himself. He made a conscious decision to build the tower. And that goes for every one of us here. When I first started coming to this church, and I know I go say that a lot, but when I first started coming to this church, I saw people that were living for God and wanting to do right and live right. And I wanted a part of that, and I wanted a piece of that. And I latched on and didn't let go. I wanted that for myself. When you see these great, I say great men of God, and we're all flawed and stuff, but I look up to Brother Jeff a lot, and I saw that, and I saw the way he was living and the life he was living, and the way God was using him. And I said, I want to be like that. I want a part of that. I want a piece of that. I want my life to be like that. When I look at Brother Lloyd and Brother Randy and the kind of people they are, and I know, the list goes on and on. Brother Sean and Brother Bobby Bates, inspiring men of God. And I want to build that, and I try to do that. But a lot of Christians have been motivated at some point to do certain things. And that's, going back to what I was just saying, that my motivation is I see what God can do, and I want that for my life. But a lot of Christians have been motivated at some point to do certain things. Teenagers have been inspired to live a pure life and marry the one that God has for them. They've determined to keep themselves pure and chaste and not yield to the flesh. They may have wept at an altar, made a vow to God, wrote something sweet and spiritual in their journal. If they were rewarded at the judgment seat for good intentions, they would have truckloads of crowns. And going back to intentions, when you look at it that way, when I first started coming here, I had the best of intentions. And I like to think that I've lived up to those the things I intended to do. But yeah, if we're rewarded at the judgment seat for good intentions, all of us would have truckloads. There's a lot of intentions that we have, and sometimes we don't live up to them. But good intentions are not enough, and we need to understand that. Lots of Christians sit in church and are motivated to build things. A good name, a strong, loving marriage, God-fearing, respectful children, ministries and labor that produce long-term fruit. Again, good intentions are simply not enough. And we need to look at verse 29 as we come on. Lest happily after he hath laid the foundation, so he had the intention to build the tower, and lest happily after he have laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him. So what it's talking about here is when we intend to build something, and we talked about this first off, is building that foundation. And this man right here says, if we lay that foundation happily, which is in what's the word, in haste, we're not. It says it's talking about when he's not able to finish it. We cannot finish what we start to build if we lay the foundation in haste. And after he hath laid the foundation, verse 29, we need to not do that in haste. We have to build that. We have to slowly and surely look at what we're doing, look at what we're building, and build on that foundation. And we have to also look at the investment that's put in to this building. Back to verse 29, after he hath laid the foundation, after we have laid our foundation, a good foundation on Jesus Christ. We have to make a spiritual application. We can agree in verse 29, and this man in verse 20 and in verse 28 and 29, we can agree that this man was truly saved. So when we're looking at this, Jesus is our foundation, and this man had at least got that far. So if we're breaking this down, we look at this as a saved man trying to build a building and build his life for Jesus, and we see him build his foundation on Jesus Christ, and he's got a good start. This man is saved, and and so far so good. So that. He spent the time and effort and money to get the foundation, and that's what we all need to be doing. We need to spend the time and effort to build that foundation and build upon it. This proves that his intentions were real. He went beyond just talking about it. He went beyond just thinking about it. He actually underwent the process and put some feet on his intentions. But if we go back to verse 29, we see that happily, behold, that he was being mocked because he could not finish it. Verse 29 says he was not able to finish it. Twice this passage uses the phrase, was not able to finish. His inability was based on one simple aspect. He could not afford it. He didn't have the money. He had failed to sit down and count the cost. His decision to build was purely emotional. His decision to build was a reaction to a great idea without a realization of the immense cost of finishing. And that's what I was talking about before. We see people come in here, and we all have the best of intentions, but once we realize how much it costs to truly walk with God and truly give our life to God, there's a lot of things some of us don't want to give. The cost is too high. And when we realize, like this man, a realization of the immense cost to finish that build. Some people don't finish what they started. How many people do we know that I know tons of people who, when you see they have a good start but not a good finish, and they never finish what they started when it comes to following Jesus Christ. I mean, just since I've been here the 4.5 years, there's been so many people come and go in this church, and it's sad to think about. They start off good, but they don't finish. It gets too much for them, and the cost is too high. They don't want to let go of things. If we still look at verse 29 here, we see all that behold it begin to mock him. He started to build this building. He laid a good foundation. He started to build it, but he ran out of money, and it cost too much, so he wasn't finishing, and those people started to mock him for not finishing the building. Jesus pointed out a seemingly irrelevant fact. While this man was being inspired to build, while this man was intending to build, while this man was investing in his foundation, while this man was in the process of realization that he was unable to finish it, there were people in the distance beholding it. There were people in the shadows that were watching to see what would transpire. That all that they're talking about here are people in our life. That could be anybody. That could be our wife or husband. There's people watching us every day. The all could be your children or your grandchildren. The all could be your coworkers or your friends. The all could be your extended family that you've witnessed to about your great intentions. And that's one thing that that I think about a lot and that convicts me a lot. I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people see that the changes that I've made and the things I want to do. And I think about all the intentions that I've put forth and the people that I've talked to about it. And that should be a scary thought when you say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And they don't, those things don't come to pass. We have to really be careful about being on fire for God one minute, but a week later that fire's put out. And the word mock him means they laughed, made light, made sport, and to play with. But they were mocking this man. What a sad tragedy to realize that our inability to build on the foundation could become a joke. That's a scary thought. Instead of inspiring the next generation to build, we could in essence prove to them that it can't be done. Instead of motivating our family and each other to build also, we may in fact talk them out of it. And that's scary to me. That's what I'm talking about. All this stuff that I've been trying to do, the foundation that I built on, this ministry that I have, all this stuff that I want to do for God, there's people on the outside looking in, and if those things don't come to fruition, and if the fruit that if I'm not bearing fruit and my testimony doesn't show that I'm living for God, why would somebody out from the outside looking in like, well, this guy's on fire for God, but nothing's come of it? Why would I want to do something like that? We may be talking, instead of motivating people and motivating each other to build on the foundation of Jesus Christ, we could be talking people out of it. Let's go to 1 Chronicles 21 real quick. And that's a scary thought. The more I put this outline together, the more I thought about it. Having the best of intention is all well and good, but when it comes to, if you look ahead a year later and nothing's come of all these good intentions that you've had, what does that look like from the outside looking in? 1 Chronicles 21. I'm going to go, let me see. That's a long chapter. Just give me a minute. How much time we got? I got plenty of time. I'm going to read through the whole thing. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. And David said to Joab and to the rulers of the people, go number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring the number of them to me that I may know it. And Joab answered the Lord, make his people 100 times so many more as they be, but my lord the king, are they not all my lord's servants? Why then doth my lord require this thing? Why will he be a cause of trespass to Israel? Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Wherefore Joab departed and went through all Israel and came to Jerusalem. And Joab gave the sum of the number of the people unto David, and all they of Israel were 1,000 and 100,000 men that drew sword. And Judah was 460 and 10,000 men that drew sword. But Levi and Benjamin counted he not among them, for the king's word was abominable to Joab. And God was displeased with this thing. Therefore he smote Israel. And David said unto God, I have sinned greatly because I have done this thing. But now I beseech thee, do away with the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. And the Lord spake unto Gad, David's seer, saying, go and tell David, saying, thus saith the Lord, I offer thee 3 things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So Gad came to David and said unto him, thus saith the Lord, choose thee, either 3 years famine, or 3 months to be destroyed before thy foes, while that the sword of thine enemies overtaketh thee, or else 3 days the sword of the Lord, even the pestilence in the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the coasts of Israel. Now therefore advise thyself what word I shall bring again to him that sent me. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. Let me fall now into the hand of the Lord, for very great are his mercies, but let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men. And God sent an angel into Jerusalem to destroy it. And as he was destroying, the Lord beheld, and he repented him of the evil, and said to the angel that destroyed, It is enough, stay now thine hand. And the angel of the Lord stood by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, and David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord stand between the earth and the heaven, having a drawn sword in his hand, stretched out over Jerusalem. Then David and the elders of Israel, who were clothed in sackcloth, fell upon their faces. And David said unto God, It is not I that commanded the people to be numbered. Even I it is that have sinned and done evil indeed. But as for these sheep, what have they done? Let thine hand, I pray thee, O Lord my God, be on me and on my father's house, but not on thy people, that they should be plagued. Then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And David went up at the saying of Gad, which he spake in the name of the Lord. And Ornan turned back and saw the angel, and his 4 sons with him hid themselves. Now Ornan was threshing wheat. And as David came to Ornan, Ornan looked and saw David, and went out of the threshing floor and bowed himself to David with his face to the ground. Then David said to Ornan, Grant me the place of this threshing floor, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord. Thou shalt grant it to me for the full price, that the plague may be stayed from the people. And Ornan said unto David, Take it to thee, and let my lord the king do that which is good in his eyes. Lo, I give thee the oxen also for burnt offerings, and the threshing instruments for wood, and the wheat for the meat offering. I give it all. And King David said to Ornan, Nay, but I will verily buy it for the full price, for I will not take that which is thine for the Lord, nor offer burnt offerings without cost. David gave to Ornan for the place 600 shekels of gold by weight. And David built there an altar unto the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings, and called upon the Lord. And he answered him from heaven by fire upon the altar of burnt offering. And the Lord commanded the angel, and he put up his sword again into the sheath thereof. At that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, then he sacrificed there. For the tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses made in the wilderness, and the altar of the burnt offering, were at that season in the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, for he was afraid because of the sword of the angel of the Lord. There's a lot to unpack there, but if we look at verse 23, where it says, I give it all, the chapter begins with David provoking God by numbering Israel. Joab tried to talk him out of it, but David insisted. After numbering the men, David realized that he had sinned against God. That was in verse 8. God gave him a choice, 3 years of famine, 3 months of war, or 3 days of pestilence. David chose the 3 days, and God killed 70,000 men with pestilence before he stayed his hand. God then commanded David to build an altar on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. When he arrived there, Ornan offered to give David the threshing floor and the oxen and the instruments of wood and wheat and all that. But Ornan said, I give it all. But if we notice what David said in verse 24, he says, And King David said to Ornan, Nay, but I will verily buy it all for the full price, for I will not take that which is thine for the Lord, nor offer burnt offerings without cost. And that's the key right there. When we're trying to build something, we've got to pay the cost to build it. Ornan's trying to give him this stuff, but David knows that he has got to pay full price to build what God wants. And that's the key right there. I know that was a lot, that's a long chapter, but to take out of that, what we need to take out of it, we need to realize what it costs to build a life for Christ. And a lot of people don't realize that. If we look at 2 Samuel 24:24, and the king said unto Araunah, Nay, but I will surely buy it of thee at a price, neither will I offer burnt offering unto the Lord my God of that which doth cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. See it again there. We can't offer anything unto God which doth cost us nothing. Everything we do costs us something. So what we need to do is count the cost, and we need to look at what we're willing to pay to be able to follow Christ and to be able to live a life for Christ. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even think of that when I first started. When I decided to just take hold, and I decided that I was going to change my life, I was going to quit drinking and quit running around like an idiot and doing all that stuff I was doing and living a life of sin. Honestly, I don't think very many people do. Well, the Holy Spirit just speaks to us, and we want to live our life for God. And we want to be saved, and we want to have salvation. We don't really think about that right off the bat. What is all of that going to cost me? What did all that cost Christ? I mean, Christ gave his life for us. But we've got to give our life to Christ. And God forbid we have to give our life for Christ. There's many people out there that do that today. If we look at some of these places like North Korea and China, there's plenty of Christians that are martyred for Christ. And God forbid we have to do that, but we are pretty blessed right now. We're blessed because we live in a free country. We can worship freely. We're blessed because God gave us this building to worship in. We're blessed a lot of ways, but there's still a cost to do what we're doing right here and right now for Christ. The cost I had to pay was one thing just right off the bat is I lost a lot of friends, but you know what? They weren't really friends anyway. So that wasn't much of a cost. One thing I had to pay to follow Christ was I had to give up a sinful life, what I thought was fun and living, what I thought was a life of passion and pleasure. I had to give all that up. But what kind of cost is that? I'm glad I gave all that up. The life I live now, I thought before that I was happy, but now I found joy, if that makes any sense. True, unadulterated joy. There's a cost to build a life for Christ. And I think about this too. I don't care how old you are. And if you're following Christ, you're always going to be building upon that life. And I don't know if we'll ever get finished, but we have to be prepared to finish. Are we prepared to count the cost of obedience? And are we prepared to finish? That's a good question. Are we prepared? Am I prepared to follow Christ the way he wants me to follow, the way he wants me to follow him? Because there is a cost to that. I really, really think that the closer I get to God, I realize how much he's preparing the way for me to do more. I know I always want to do more. And for me to do that, I've got to separate myself from the world. I'm having a hard time explaining this. I hate when I do that. Let's just say this. I've had to give up a lot of my free time of things that I like doing to get close to God by reading his word, to get close to God by doing things for the church, to get closer to God by just studying the word. And you know what? So a lot of that just came naturally. Because I remember before, when just getting in the truck, and I would always just turn the radio on and just listen. Now I make it a point to get in my truck and actually put something on for God. Put on a teaching, put on a sermon, put on godly music. You make a point to do that. the closer I get to God, the more I want to do for God, basically. And I've had to give up a lot of things to follow Christ. And the thing about that is when I look at it, I gave up the things of the world to gain the things of God. So I was prepared to pay all that. Building upon the foundation that I build upon, I think I missed something here. I did. I'm missing a page, but anyway, let's move on. Does anybody have any questions right off the bat so far? Am I making any sense at all? Probably not. I lost but the end of my page. But anyway, I had a point to make there, and apparently it's not in there. But anyway, building a foundation. We talked about that first, and then we talked about building the framework on that foundation, the framework for our following of Jesus Christ. And what we also need to think about is the cost of that building. Building upon that foundation costs a lot, and we see that. I've seen that in this. How much does it cost to run this church? We don't really think about that. How much does it cost to see souls saved? What are we willing to pay to see souls saved? Are we willing to do the work? There's a cost right there. Let's go just right off the top of my head. How much goes into putting on one of the tent meetings? There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of cost monetarily. There's a lot of time and effort that we put in to just put the tent up. There's a lot of time and effort that, Brother Jeff and Brother Randy are they show up, Levi, 2 hours before it even starts to set up the music equipment. There's a cost there to do something for the Lord when we're doing a tent meeting. And you see what people put into that. You see the time it takes and the time that Brother Jeff and Brother Randy have to take away from their personal lives to do something for God. And I think about all the time that it takes away from my personal life, and you know what? I don't mind doing it, but that goes into serving this church and serving God. There's a lot of things that me and my wife don't get to do because I put this church first and I put God first. My wife is sick in bed right now and hurting, and she's there sitting there at the house all alone, and God forbid she's got to get up and go to the bathroom because she's by herself and she's got to use that walker, and she's not very good at it. But you know what? I trust God that she's in God's hands. Would I rather be there to help her? Would I rather be there to nurse on her and help her? Yeah, but you know what? I've got to be here. I've got to take the time away from taking care of my wife to come here and teach Sunday school and come here and be in God's house and worship God like I'm supposed to. So there's a cost right there. And there's a cost that everyone's paying right now to be here and sitting in Sunday school right now, but you know what? I put God first in everything, and I want to put God first. There's a lot of things that I want to do personally that I'm not going to be able to do because I'd rather be doing things for God, if that makes any sense, That's what we have to think about is are we willing to pay that cost? Are we willing to give those things up because we would rather follow God than have those things that the world has to offer? And I've heard Brother Jeff say this multiple times. There's things he's had to give up when it comes to Wesley and Levi because he's put so much time and effort into this church. You know, if you look at dads out there, I mean, my kids are grown, but when they're that age, you want to go camping and fishing and road trips and all this other stuff that those two don't get to do, because Jeff puts his heart and soul into this church, and he puts his heart and soul into following God. You know, that's kind of the price and the costs that we have to think about. And like I said before, people don't want to give those things up. People don't want to give up going fishing on a Sunday morning when they should be in church. People don't want to give up watching football all day Sunday when football season's going on when they should be in church. They don't want to give those things up. Those things are more important to them than going to God's house and fellowshipping and worshiping, you know. And was the whole point of this lesson here is, are we willing to give up that family time? Are we willing to give up those personal things that we enjoy? Are we willing to give up those things for God? And I am, because I've done it. I know Brother Jeff is, because I've seen him do it. I know everybody in here is, because you're sitting here listening to me babble on and on and on and on. And yes, I feel sorry for you. But yeah, I mean, are we willing to give everything to God, or are we still holding on to things? And I know for a fact that there's people that do that, because I used to do that. I don't do it anymore, thank the Lord, because my heart has changed so much. When I remember, you know, getting in the car to come to church and be like, you're thinking about anything and everything but church. You were going, you know, I was like, yeah, I need to go, but I'd rather be doing this in the back of your mind. And now it's like, I don't even think twice. It's like, I mean, it's like, you know, this is where I need to be. This is where I have to be. Because if I'm not here, then, yeah, if I'm not here, there's something wrong, you know. But there's a lot of people that don't want to give that stuff up. I mean, the biggest thing they don't want to give up is their sin. There's a lot of people that don't go to church, I know out there, that don't go to church just because they're not married and they're living together, and they don't want to go to church because the preacher's going to preach against that. So they just don't go. There's a lot of people out there that drink, I know, because I was one of them, that don't go to church because the preacher preaches against drinking, and they don't want to hear it. So they don't go to church and they don't give their lives to God because they don't want to give that stuff up. And I know that because I used to do it. And it's a sad state. I mean, God wants all of us, not just part of us. God wants us to be all in or all out. And I know Jesus Christ said that himself. I would rather you be cold than lukewarm. And I'm still convicted of that, because I know, and we all do it, because I know that there's times that I think, man, am I doing all I can do? Am I giving everything I can to Christ? You know, we always feel like we could do more and say more, and that's just human nature. You know, we always feel like we come up short. I mean, technically we do. We can never live up to what we need to be, but we need to be all in, or we need to just be all, you know, or be all out. We're either for God or against God. But there is a price to pay for that. We've got to give up a lot of things if we want to follow Christ and do it the right way. We can't just, you know, cling on to those worldly things that we enjoy. You know, I used to enjoy a lot of stuff that I don't do anymore. You know, there's a lot of movies I can't watch anymore because I don't want to watch them anymore. All that music I used to be into that I used to enjoy, I just don't enjoy it anymore. It's not of God, so I don't want to listen to it anymore. I've given up a lot of relationships with people I care deeply about, and the only relationship I have with them now is remembering in my prayers and praying for their salvation, and that's sad. I know a lot of people that don't give their all to God because they don't want to ruin that relationship with their best friend they've had for years and years and years. You know, just like, and that's just, to me, that's dumb. You're giving up Christ for a relationship with a fallen person. Does that make any sense? No. But you see it, I see it time and time and time again. There's lots of people that go to church by themselves and their spouses don't go, and they try so hard to get into church and do what's right and stay faithful, but they've got a spouse at home that does nothing but bring them down, and that does nothing but tell them, oh, they don't need to be there at church, and that just browbeats them and tries to get them out of church. And there's people in our church right now that are going through that, but they're staying faithful. I think about that. I don't know. I don't know how they handle that. I don't. I try to put myself in that situation or think about that, and it's like that's got to be one of the toughest things to deal with on this planet. It's really, I mean, when you've got a spouse that wants to live in the world and is deeply influenced by Satan, but you want to serve God every way you can. Just think about that for a minute. How much of a cost what kind of cost is that? What price are they paying to stay faithful to God when they have a home life that is just absolutely a nightmare? But they stay faithful. They're here every Sunday. They're here every Wednesday. And they are one of the most faithful people I know. And it's heartbreaking. But that's a price that they're willing to pay to stay true and stay on a righteous path and stay true to God. A lot of us pay more than others do. I know that. You know, I've got nothing to complain about at all. I mean, absolutely nothing. I mean, God, since I've given my life to God, God has blessed me in ways that are just immeasurable. You know, I mean, I don't know of anybody else besides Blake who's got a job that's like almost like coming here. It really is. You know, there's no cussing, there's no, nasty stories being told in the break room. There's, we don't have to deal with, well, unless it's a customer, idiots. I mean, there's stuff we do have to deal with. It's life, but I've never worked in a place where my work environment is filled with God and has the presence of God like that does. I mean, that's such a blessing, is just unreal. But there's some of us who have to go to a job where it's nothing but the opposite. It's like walking through hell's doors. I mean, I can't imagine being a married man and being a faithful husband and being a faithful follower of Christ and walking into an office I work at and half the women are showing their cleavage and have skirts up to here and having to deal with something like that all day long. There's people that have to do that. I mean, think about that. Or think of, they walk into the break room and this guy's telling dirty jokes and this guy's bragging about all the women he slept with over the weekend, and it's like, imagine, what kind of environment is that to deal with for 8 hours, 5 days a week? But that's the price of following Christ. That's you could fall right in, like I used to do. I mean, I was one of those people, But now that's a price we have to be willing to pay to follow God, is to put up with that type of stuff and to live with that type of stuff. Because it would be very easy to just, like I said, to just fall into the world, or for some, or for someone that has a spouse that doesn't follow God, to go home and just say, fine, I just won't go no more. They just give in to Satan and give in to the pressure, and just give into their spouse and just say, you know what, I just don't want to hear it anymore. I just won't go anymore. And it's just heartbreaking to think about that. But that's a price that we have to be willing to pay, And we need to think about what the cost of being obedient to God is, which is sometimes a high price to pay. Anyway, well, I got back on track there at the end. So that was good. Anyway, does anybody else have something to add? Go ahead, brother.
You know, if we follow God's plan, we're not really paying a high price when we come to heaven.
Technically, no, but
We put God first.
exactly.
Now, yes, we pay a price along the way. Do you
Mhm.
lose family members? Do you lose friends?
Yeah.
Because they know who you were. They don't understand who you've become.
Yes.
And to your point earlier, if you don't build a strong, if you don't have a good foundation,
Mm-hmm.
you stop building, then they're going, then they look at you and they mock you, being, look, see, I told you.
Exactly. Yeah. That goes back. Yeah. That's kind of how and like my outline was all messed up, but that's how going back to having a spouse that at home like that, when you're trying to build something for God and you don't do it right and you don't, and they see you fall, it's like, look at you. What has that church done for you now?
Right.
You know?
But what they
Yeah.
say is, yeah, we pay a price, but
Mm-hmm.
we paid the price.
He paid the price. Jesus paid it all. Yeah.
Paid it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it doesn't, so it's not that hard to pay that price when you think of that.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's still painful.
But
Yeah, it is, and it's a real. I mean, that's a real deep subject, and I'm probably the worst person to try to cover that subject. I'm not, but it's really hard to live for God when a lot of people around you don't want to. And it's even harder when it's in your own home, much less your place of work,
you know, and I'm sorry to interject, but it's all worth it when you see one person.
Exactly.
One person
Mm-hmm.
sees the light of Christ through you,
Yep.
where you're at, and whether that's at work or whether that's at home.
Mm-hmm. And yeah,
It's all worth it when you see that.
yeah, and that's why it's important to have that foundation. That's why it's important to have that, have a good foundation and have a good framing around that foundation. And that's one thing that I've really, since coming here, been really trying to dig into and dig deep into is the discipleship process of it, because you can't just say, there's a lot of churches out there, we got 50 people saved this Sunday morning. How many of those are going to still be there in a month? You've got to build on that foundation, and we've got to be disciples for Christ too. God showed me that big time. We can't just, get someone getting saved is all well and good if they get saved here, but we've got to make sure that they have, build on, if somebody gets saved here, that's their foundation is Jesus Christ. They get saved. They built the foundation. They want, now they've got to build that framework, which comes from coming to church 3 times a week, which the Bible study and all that. And we've got to be good disciples, and we've got to be able to, we've got to be able to, when they look at us from the outside looking in, be good, have a good testimony, And if we're not building on our foundation good enough, and they look at us and our foundation is good, but our house looks like junk, you can have a great foundation, but if you build a mud shack on that foundation that looks like something from a third world country, nobody's going to want to go in and live there, basically, yeah. But anybody else? No? Anyway, hopefully that made sense. I'm telling you, this is trying to put a lesson together and make it I try my best, but sometimes it's just like, What in the world? Oh, yeah. It's, yeah, I know. Well, yeah. It's, anyway. Thank God for, thank the Lord for this church, and thank the Lord for everybody in here. And I don't know where I'd be without this church and the people in it. I mean, that's the key right there. We have. When I first started coming here, I had every intention. I gave God my life. I said, Lord, this is it. I give everything to you. I'm ready to make a change, and I'm ready to follow you, and I'm ready to do whatever I've got to do to stay true to you. And, you know, and God's really been good, giving me the things that I need to stay on that path that he's put me on. Amen. But we never did opening prayer. I just kind of we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and close in prayer, and we'll take up the offering. That's what happens when I've got to eat in 5 minutes and rush. But oh well.